She called all of you her enemy. Is that the proper way to talk to each other in a presidential campaign, particularly when she was a senator, Secretary of State, and First Lady? Is that appropriate?
Of course not. Of course it's not appropriate. And I think one of the things that has happened in our politics, and maybe in American life in general, is we sometimes attack the messenger if we disagree with the message. That's why I went back on The View, actually, to say to the ladies of The View, who frequently, unfortunately, attack the messenger, that we need to be able to have a civil conversation about our differences. There are real differences between Republicans and Democrats.
Did they treat you well?
I think it was a reasonably civil conversation, actually. There are real differences between Republicans and Democrats, and those differences matter. There is a real difference in our vision for this nation, which seeks to begin with the fundamental premise that no one of us is any better than any other one of us, that each of us are gifted by God, that every one of us can live lives of dignity and purpose and meaning, that every life is filled with possibilities and potential. And we are Republicans because we know our values work better to lift people up regardless of their circumstances. That's a very different vision than a vision that says, no, some are going to have to take care of others. Big government is the answer, and some people can't live lives of dignity and purpose and meaning. I think that is what many progressives believe. We have to be able to have those fundamental discussions about the differences in our worldview without ever demonizing a messenger or ever calling somebody names. When people start using a lot of adjectives, then usually they're not sticking to the point. When people start saying you're stupid, you're evil, you're dumb, they're not talking about core differences.
What is the greatest moral threat facing America today?
I would agree with all that has been said. I guess my way of saying it would be a loss of clarity. We have become a nation where everything is relative. And we know that actually much is black and white. There is good and there is evil. There is right and there is wrong. There are things that work and there are things that don't work. ISIS is evil, it has to be defeated. Some things are right, some things are wrong. We know a family works better for a child, an intact family works better, but somehow we've come to this place where everything is treated as equally good or equally right or equally workable, and it's not. It's a loss of clarity.
But what is the role of a president in addressing political correctness?
It bothers me because I think, of course they have a right to protest, absolutely. But it doesn't seem to me that people standing and shouting are interested in having a conversation. And I want to link it all the way back to Ben's comment about political correctness. You know, during one of our Republican debates, I made a very strong statement about the Planned Parenthood videos and the fact that when Planned Parenthood is harvesting body parts, it undermines the character of our nation. For the many weeks and months following that, virtually every time I went on the media, I was told that that simply isn't happening. It's not true. And as recently, young women show up, not all the time, but frequently in my events and say, that's not happening. It's not true. I mentioned going on The View the other day, and literally as I'm talking about Planned Parenthood, which now agrees that they're not accepting compensation for the harvesting of body parts, sounds like an admission to me, I was told that that's not true, Carly, that's a lie. Why are you telling the American people that's not true? And this is, I think, the dangerous point that we've reached, where a point of view, it's not just that it is demonized. It's not just that people don't want to have a conversation about why they differ. It is that there is control over what is perceived to be true or not. There are literally millions of people in this country who still believe it is not true that Planned Parenthood alters abortion procedures and engages in late-term abortions for the purposes of harvesting body parts. That's how dangerous this political correctness and mix of media decision about what to talk about and what not to talk about has become. And so I do think part of the great challenge for this nation is to educate people as to what is actually happening. And I think the role of a president is to explain to people what is really happening, to make people aware that yes, indeed, Planned Parenthood is engaging in these procedures. Yes, indeed, Democrats do believe it's not a life until it's born. Yes, indeed, progressives have succeeded in having the federal government take over the student loan industry, and it's one of the reasons why student loan debt has increased so rapidly. I think the American people don't always know because they're not always educated and informed, and that's part of the legacy of political correctness. A president can educate and inform as well as inspire.
So I'm going to ask, why was the reaction so strong, not just in Washington, D.C., and not just between Boston and Washington or San Francisco? It was, the public said, I don't agree with this. Was it badly communicated? Was it badly defined? Because right now, there's a problem in this country. The public actually sides on the side of preventing discrimination rather than religious liberty.
A couple comments, if I may. First, I think everyone on this stage and everyone in the audience as well would agree the government should not discriminate. And when government discriminates in the bestowal of benefits or in how it treats its citizens, that's a problem. That's a different issue than the definition of marriage. And what the Supreme Court did was say, we are going to decide what the definition of marriage is. It is also true that I think there has been this reinterpretation, if you will, of many aspects of the Constitution. Our founders, as Marco so eloquently said, believed that the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, the right to fulfill your potential, the right to find and use your God-given gifts came from God and could not be taken away by man or government. The Constitution was written in no small measure as a prevention of the abuse of power by government. So many will say the Constitution guarantees this right, this right, this right. It guarantees some rights, very basic rights, but fundamentally, the Constitution enumerates powers of government to prevent the abuse of power by government.
Have you been discriminated against?
RFRA in Indiana, I actually stood up and defended that law vocally and castigated some of my fellow technology CEOs who had the arrogance to say that they were going to boycott selling their products in Indiana. My comment publicly was, really, I don't see you boycotting the selling of your products to China or Saudi Arabia or Iran, where all manner of human rights are discriminated against day after day. I believe RFRA was misinterpreted by the media and by many to say that RFRA permits discrimination. No, RFRA does not permit discrimination. RFRA protects the exercise of religious liberty. And unfortunately, we have reached a point in our nation's history where we need to protect people's ability to exercise their religious liberty from both the federal government and state governments, which is why I support state RFRA laws. And remember that we are right now witnessing the Supreme Court taking on a decision where the federal government is attacking the Little Sisters of the Poor's ability to exercise their religious liberty. This is not a theoretical threat in this nation. It is a real threat.
Have you been discriminated against in your career?
Not in terms of how benefits are bestowed, no. Let us be honest. People have biases. People have biases. Has it on occasions in my life been more difficult for me because people assumed I was a woman in a man's world and therefore I was less competent? Perhaps. But that is not the same as being discriminated against by government.
It's September 11th, 2017, and you're in the Oval Office, and it's 9 p.m., and you hear that there's been a simultaneous attack on Times Square, on the Theater District, and on Yankee Stadium. You pick up the phone, and this is what you hear. What is the very first thing that you do?
The first thing I would do, honestly, is fall to my knees and pray, because the president, despite all of the great assistance that is readily available, and each of the gentlemen have talked about that assistance. Despite all of that assistance, what is needed is courage and wisdom and guidance for a very difficult time. But I also think it goes back to, what do we do now? What do we do now? Because we don't want to be facing another 9/11 on 2017. And so what we must do is deny ISIS territory. We must deny ISIS territory. And that it means we must cut off their supply lines. We must cut off their money. It means we must support our allies in the fighting of this fight. And so many of our allies have asked for very specific things, which we have not provided. We are not leading in the world, and when the United States of America does not lead, the world is a tragic place. And we must protect the homeland by putting all of the safeguards in place that President Obama so objects to. What I must say I find most objectionable about President Obama's comments from overseas, about Republicans in general, about Senator Cruz in particular, is he is always talking about compassion. Basically, what he says to the American people is, if you do not agree with what I am not doing, and he is not leading, his administration has not led, they have without a doubt created the circumstances for a more dangerous and tragic world, then either you are stupid or you are evil or you lack compassion. Let me tell you two things this administration should be doing to demonstrate compassion in the world, and two things that I will do as president in addition to denying ISIS territory. The United States of America should be leading a humanitarian relief effort. The refugee crisis has been predicted for years. There are 55 to 60 million people on the move every single year around the world, running away from conflict. The United States could be leading a humanitarian relief effort. We are not. But secondly, the United States of America could be leading with an international coalition, not just an effort to defeat ISIS, but an effort to defeat human trafficking. Human trafficking is a scourge on this earth. They prey on the desperation of people. And so many of these people moving around are having their life savings taken away from them and promised some safe passage to some nirvana, which of course doesn't exist. That's why you see 3-year-old children drowning on the beaches. So, Mr. President, if you are truly compassionate, then stand up and lead humanitarian efforts, human trafficking efforts, and yes, lead an alliance to defeat ISIS, deny them territory, and support our allies, because this is an evil that must be defeated.
By the time you take office, the Iranian nuclear deal will be in full force. What will you do in order to correct the damage done by that agreement and begin to leverage some pressure again on Iran to stop their aggressive behavior in the Middle East?
It's a great question. So it's not, do you oppose it? It is law. What are you going to do as president?
On day one, I will make 2 phone calls. The first will be to my good friend Bibi Netanyahu, a man I've known for a long time, to reassure him that we will stand with the state of Israel always. The second will be to the supreme leader of Iran, who might not take my phone call, but he will get my message. And the message is New Deal. New deal with a new president. Until and unless you open every military and nuclear facility to real, anytime, anywhere inspections by our people, not yours, we, the United States of America, will make it as difficult for you to move money as possible. We can do that. We don't need anyone's permission or collaboration to do it, and I will do it. We must stop the money flow. Hundreds of billions of dollars being used to build up military capability, nuclear capability, fund terrorist organizations, sow murder and mayhem throughout the Middle East. And with those 2 phone calls, a message will go out loud and clear around the world. The United States of America is back in the leadership business. We should make no mistake, ISIS is our near-term threat and they must be defeated. But Iran and Russia together in an unholy alliance are a medium-term threat of fairly significant proportion. Why? Because Iran has had a long-term strategy to become regional hegemon of the Middle East. Russia is now allied with them. Russia sees itself as the purveyor of expertise, materiel to fuel, literally, Iran's nuclear ambitions. This is a very dangerous alliance that is forming up. And if the United States of America does not stand up and lead and defeat ISIS, yes, by working with our Sunni Arab allies and the Kurds. Yes, by providing them with the bombs, the materiel, the intelligence, the armaments they have asked for. But if the United States of America does not stand up and lead and defeat ISIS, then our interests and our allies' interests will be weakened for decades to come in the Middle East. Russia cannot become the strong arm of this region. I want to go all the way back, if I may, to your question about what motivates President Obama. President Obama, yes, has been a bad president. That's clear. And he has put this nation in grave danger. However, the truth is we are not running against President Obama. We are running against Hillary Clinton, who will be the nominee of her party. And in this regard, Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama share a failing. They are politically correct politicians, and they have waged war. They haven't been willing to wage it. They haven't even been willing to tell the American people the truth because of a political agenda. Why is it that Hillary Clinton, the morning after a purposeful terrorist attack in Benghazi, talked to the American people about a videotape that did not represent our values? Because the truth did not fit the political narrative that was important for them to persuade the American people of. And when Hillary Clinton, who is as guilty of the dangers we face in the world today as President Barack Obama, when Hillary Clinton has the audacity to ask what difference does it make how Americans were killed in Benghazi, what she fails to understand is that when terrorists purposefully attack an embassy and murder 4 Americans, and we, instead of having a purposeful, powerful response, instead lie to the American people and talk to about a videotape, the message that goes out to terrorists all around the world, whether it's Al-Qaeda, Al-Nusra, or ISIS, is open season on Americans. The United States of America will not stand up and fight. This is political correctness taking to a level where it is endangering our nation, our world, and our allies.
My career was supposed to have begun in 1996. And 3 days before the Iowa caucuses, my father had a heart attack and died just in the middle of the night, just went down. And I thought that it would go away. And it doesn't. But I was taught something there, which is as horrible as it is to lose a parent, it is nothing like losing a child. I know faith matters to you. Is there anything that you can teach me about how faith helped you cope with your loss?
Well, first let me say that I am moved by every story that I've heard this evening and honored to be at this table. I was very blessed. I think it was part of God's plan, actually, that I would renew a personal relationship with Jesus Christ before I needed it most. As I had gotten older and, more sophisticated, my faith grew sort of abstract. And I came to view God a bit like a super CEO. That everything sort of worked the way he intended it to, but he couldn't possibly attend to every detail or have a personal relationship with every life. But I had a dear friend, a pastor, who pushed me very hard. And one Christmas morning, literally, it sounds corny, but it's true. One Christmas morning, I woke up and it sort of smacked me in the head like a revelation. I thought, I come from the world of technology. That's where I've spent my business career. And I thought, if people, if humans, can create global positioning systems that are so complex and so sophisticated that they can literally track billions and billions of moving objects with incredible precision every second of every day, and even give instructions at the next available opportunity, make a U-turn, then God can keep track of us and have a personal relationship with each of us. That revelation helped me, helped my husband and I, helped our family. I had a long battle with cancer. It was a very tough battle. There were months when literally the only thing I could eat was the grilled cheese sandwiches my husband Frank, who's here, of more than 30 years, made for me. But while I was going through that battle, our younger daughter Lori was going through a much worse battle. A battle against the demons of addiction. A battle she had waged for a very long time. And literally, as I finished my cancer treatments, she died. There is no possibility that I could have endured that loss unless Jesus had been with me all the way. There is no possibility that our family actually would become stronger through that terrible loss unless Jesus Christ were with us every step of the way. And as I remember planning her funeral, I remember choosing the flowers, and I chose the flowers that were her favorite for her wedding. And I remember then choosing her mass card. And the last two lines on that mass card, which I know God put in front of me when I needed them, the last two lines are on that mass card were, "Do not grieve for me, because God has set me free." And for all the families who suffer through addictions, you know it is a terrible prison. And so for me, those words rang very true. I'm sorry for your loss. I have lost both my parents as well, and it's a terrible loss. But I also know that Jesus teaches us that we are never separated from those we truly love, and that we will see them again, and that there is a greater plan for all of us and for each of us. If I can just close perhaps by saying this, you know, all of the people on this stage, all of the people in this church are people who care deeply about our nation, who love our nation, and are people of faith who love our God as well. And we started this conversation by talking about what's at stake for our nation. What's the greatest moral challenge of our nation? And I do think it's worth saying that people of faith make better leaders, because faith gives us humility. Faith teaches us that no one of us is greater than any other one of us, that each of us are gifted by God. Faith gives us empathy. We know that all of us can fall, and every one of us can be redeemed. And faith gives us optimism. It gives us the belief that there is something better, that there is someone bigger than all of us. And so I think it's important that we elect a leader of faith, and that we elect a leader as well who knows that more prayer, not less, is necessary in public life and in all our lives. And thank you.
What's the last thing briefly that you would want to leave them? Carly, I'll start with you.
I think our nation is at a pivotal and a perilous time. I think this is a nation of limitless possibility, and yet we don't believe it anymore. We don't believe it anymore because actually possibilities are being crushed for too many Americans. Possibilities are being crushed because we've tangled their lives up in webs of dependence, or because they don't have a loving and stable family, or because they don't have a chance at an education. Possibilities are being crushed because too many people aren't working, because we make it too hard for new businesses and small businesses that create most of the new jobs to create those opportunities, those possibilities for people. This is no longer a place where people believe there is limitless possibility. And when we lose the sense of limitless possibility that's always defined this nation, we lose the core of who we are. We talked at the beginning of this evening about our founders and their genius. And they said this was a place where anyone had the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, where everyone has the possibility to find and use their God-given gifts and create a life of dignity and purpose and meaning for themselves. And yet our founders also said that because that right comes from God, it should not be taken away by man or government. The pivotal and perilous time we have reached is that government is crushing possibilities for the people of this nation. Our government has grown so big, so powerful, so costly, so corrupt, so inept, and yes, so politically correct and politically driven, that the truth is possibilities are being crushed. Government is taking them away from people. I actually think the pivotal and perilous time we've reached in our nation's history is that as citizens, we must take our nation back. Ours was intended to be a citizen government. We have fine people on this stage. But it is also true that we have talked about these problems for a very long time. So I think we have to remember who we are. Ours was intended to be a citizen government. And I think what our nation calls for now is leadership. Leadership that has been tested, leadership that understands how the economy works, how the world works, how bureaucracies work, because that's what federal governments have become, how technology works, and mostly that the highest calling of leadership is to unlock potential in others. And now I believe we need a leader who understands their calling, is to challenge the status quo of Washington and unlock the potential of this great nation so that we can once again be a nation of limitless possibility for every citizen, regardless of their circumstances.